All right. We're chugging along. We're chugging along. We're chugging along. We're chugging along. We're gonna read a little bit more. We're gonna get through it slowly but surely. Okay. So this example was shown several times in the Bible from Lot and his wife's test being commanded by the Creator to leave Sodom and not turn back. It was also exemplified in Job's test by the adversary telling the Creator if he touched Job's blessing, then Job would curse the Creator. Even Abraham, when the Creator tested him by telling him to sacrifice his son. The highlight in each of these lessons is sacrifice. Okay, again, I'm not trying to give a sermon in this chapter. I rarely, when I write my books, you'll rarely ever hear me paraphrase or quote the scriptures. And if I do, I try to keep it creator as to leave it broad and general for everybody from different walks of life who has different perspectives of who is God, etc., and people who may be agnostic or don't believe in a God at all. Okay? Gotta leave it open to everybody. But generalizing, these are some things that are dawning on me. Hey, maybe this is what this means. The highlight in each of these lessons is sacrifice. I wasn't ready to let go. I was, I want to be out there, but I'm thinking like maybe it's time for me to come back. Okay? In every man and woman's life, we're faced with choices in the form of obstacles in our life. There may be a trip we must take, but we don't have the money to get where we need to go, so we're forced to sell objects that we would not like to sell for gas, money, or a bus ticket. There may be other instances where an individual like myself may be on a music tour and the DJ cannot make it, so I have to hire another DJ or cancel the show, which all can alter the future of not only myself but each member of my band. In each of these cases, there are things in life we must leave behind to get ahead and things we must embrace to have a brighter future and not become buried in the rubble of our past or our family or parents' past. That's heavy right there. A lot of times, tradition-wise, things can become a vicious cycle when it began a tradition. When we're trying to sort through the past of our predecessors, our parents, our professors, our mentors, whoever, instead of just letting it all go away and just creating what we got. Know when to hold them and know when to fold them. Kind of type reflection right there. The lesson I learned in this teaching from the Bible and what my parents taught me of it is that the most important thing in life is to have a beautiful attitude amplified in the Beatitudes, faith in oneself and character and being resourcefulness and being resourceful. Okay, again, it's not me like having some great awakening. This is me, not to take from it, just realization, a basic realization that I don't need to do so much. Maybe I don't need the record deal. If I get it, maybe it doesn't have to be so much money. I don't need to spend so much time over here, whether it's a logistical point or a major. Let me just get into the middle of the things. Let me get back into the boots that I left behind. Okay. Okay. So if one has these things and is not clingy when it comes to objects, they will not become a bag lady, a pack rat, or a hoarder, and will never be lazy, slothful, depressed, or an invert, staying in the house, playing with their objects, and not building relationships with people and learning about the world around them and how to survive in it. And not suffer from the idle hands which is really what angers the creator, according to my interpretation, etc., etc. Okay, and to stop relying on a fallen nature. In short, you know, gladness. Be glad. Discover gladness. Discover what it means to be glad. Discover that Bobby McFerrin ain't got no girl to make me smile, but I ain't gonna worry. Be happy attitude. Be glad. Be old fashioned. Stick to the rivers and streams type of thing. Next chapter, strange fruit. I summed it up a little bit. I'm trying to keep a layman's. It has often been said that curiosity killed the cat. Well, in my life, I have been one of those kind of cats who often was too curious for my own good. Believing that I have 9 lives as a child got me into a lot of trouble because I usually have been the kind of daredevil that would not think about the repercussions until after the fact. So, when you talk about that, you're talking about me traveling. Pittsburgh is a big city for people who haven't been to cities that are a lot bigger. Even if you go to cities that are a lot bigger, it's substantially big enough to leave you with a lot of probabilities. Okay? Traveling to a place like New York, traveling to a place like even Philadelphia, 300,000 people is the population of Pittsburgh, 3 million is the population of Philly, 9 million and more the population of New York, approximately 4 or 5 million in Los Angeles. Chicago, you could probably say the same thing. Millions. That's a lot of probabilities. In Pittsburgh, you might have a bully. You get into those millions, you're going to have a lot of bullies. You might not have a lot, but I'll tell you what, if you don't, you know how to move. Okay? You know how to keep to yourself. These are things that you pick up. How to keep to yourself. You know, if you can imagine walking through the city of Pittsburgh, how many times somebody asks you for a cigarette, you know? It's funny how I used to be one of those type of people that ask people for a cigarette. I haven't had a cigarette in almost 4 years. Let alone if I haven't had a cigarette, I haven't asked nobody. And 4 years ago when I had cigarettes, I was buying them for myself. Another important change. That's not gloating, that's reflection, that's realization, that's grabbing life by the reins and holding on to it, because in the pandemic, not everybody wants you to hold on to your reins. Some people in life, when you're in that state of pandemonium, the quicker you are to give them what they ask for, whether it's a cigarette, $1, or letting them stay on your couch, or letting them borrow your car, or them going along with you on some joyride, that's the last ride that they ever take. So whether it's you or me, somebody saying, come on, man. Yo, why do you keep pestering Donnie? He said no. Nah, man, he's gonna say yeah. If I just keep, he's gonna be off guard. He's just gonna get annoyed. He's just gonna say yeah. Hey, Don, no. That's what I'm saying. So, wherever that was going with you. So, the daredevil part. That's before I was 45. I'm 45 now. I'm more experienced. But even still, I'm more firm. I'm more like, yeah, I know I can handle being in a city where the odds are 10 to 1 somebody's going to ask me for a cigarette, as opposed to, 1 to 10. 1 out of 10 people are going to ask me for a cigarette. Somewhere else it's going to be 9 out of 10 people. Even though I can handle that, do I want to handle that? Probably not. Even if I was willing to endure that for a little bit, let's say for a music tour to do one show, would I want to go out there and do a show and stay in a hostel? Or would I want to go out there and do a show and stay in a hotel? Or would I want to go out there and do a show and stay with somebody that I've known for a lifelong, I've had a lifelong relationship where I don't have to pay the bill, dinner, su casa, mi casa. That sounds a little bit more like that. And that's something that takes a lot of planning and preparation, if not at all. So that's a big no for the moment. But back then, you take those chances, and you look at it like this. It's who I was back then that made me who I am today. I learned a lot, a lot of how to be and a lot of how not to be. Let's keep it moving along. Don't forget, some of you was prodigal too. Okay, so the only thing that would be on my mind before I attempted a dare, it wasn't like a dare, but it was like the word that I was looking for was stunt. For a kid to go from Pittsburgh to a city that big, or any of those cities that big, most people are going to say it's a stunt. Most people, before me traveling and leaving the Pittsburgh area, nobody ever thought that I would ever go live in Los Angeles, California. There's a lot of people that thought that I was transient out there when I actually had an apartment, There's some cities I was transient. There's some cities that I actually had an apartment. Los Angeles was a city where I actually had an apartment, and I held it down for a while. I paid the rent for a while. I had a job. I was doing things, okay, that were productive, and it worked for me. But then again, I had my bumps and bruises as well, So at the end of the day, Hollywood. At the end of the day, going into a studio and working with one of the most etched names in the game. That's like me trying to hit a full court shot, turning my back with my left hand after I do the Macarena. It's not gonna happen, okay? It's more likely that I turn my head, do the Macarena, try and do the full court shot, and it goes all the way up in the air and it lands on my head. That's more of a probability, not just for me, for anybody who's never been to a city that far. And the kind of the picture that I'm painting is it backfiring and not a basketball hitting you on the head. It's pretty funny, right? I like that. All right, so strange fruit. So we're talking about discovery. Seems good. Taste it. Es per tanto. No es per tanto means not so bad. If es per tanto means the opposite, then that's what I'm saying. It has also been told to me by one of my therapists to be careful when indulging in certain things that I've been tempted to touch and can rarely put down, mainly the marijuana plant. Her reason behind this was that everything that glitters isn't gold and should be taken with a grain of salt, not just for face value. So I get into a little bit of. So this is actually pretty interesting about the book Diary of a Glad Man when you read it. I'm not going to sit here and read through the whole thing. I'm going to skim some because, I'm only on page 5 and there's 19 pages. But now we're talking about neuroscience, okay? It's funny how, believe it or not, compatibility plays a lot in how far we get in life with our bosses, with our professors, with our mentors, and even with people who you would think we have no business thinking about this idea, compatibility, our shrink. Your therapist, your psychiatrist, your psychologist. These are things nobody talks about, but everybody has. Okay? All compatibility means is not trying to fit a square into a circle, accepting the fact that a triangle goes into a triangle, a square goes into a square. Okay? Compatibility. Compatibility as what? Hey man, do you think me and Coach Jackson, we're talking Phil Jackson, have the compatibility that him and Michael Jordan had back in the time when they won the 5 rings for the Bulls? Yeah, I do. When you grow wings and you become Michael Jordan. Pretty funny, right? I like that. So, compatibility. A coach and an athlete has a compatibility. Compatibility is what? Of course, is used in a different term, with different terminology, but that's for the people who are the most articulate people in the room. I'm not that guy. Okay. But it works. It paints the picture. It's not a triangle trying to fit into a circle. It's a square that goes into a square. Okay. So So a long time ago, like I said, when I first started talking to somebody about being depressed, you know, you can imagine it would almost be like talking to a professor when you're in high school. Interestingly enough, even though there's a lot of people, a lot of college students that come to college because their parents want them to, underneath it all, they actually themselves want to. They just don't know for what, or maybe they might not feel like it's the time, but I do, but just not right now. But my parents said that if I don't, I won't get the car, or I'm going to have to move out, or whatever. Or maybe not. Maybe it is one of those type of contingency things. Okay? But when I, at least myself, compare the two, do students really want to be in school prior to college? No. You want to be out on the playground. You want to be anywhere but in school. College, hell yeah, man. I think I know what I want to be. Or I think I'm ready to actually do something with my life. I got enough to go to college. I'm going. So, long story short, you're into your professors. Something, like not something, what they say interests you in general, okay? So maybe not every class, but etc., and on and on. There it is. All right. It's funny, right? All right. This therapist, I'm not gonna say her name, but one of the first times a therapist was actually a woman. You're a guy, you have a therapist that's a woman. You're awake, you're not sleeping whenever you're at your interview, not your interview, your appointment. Okay, like so. What do you see when you look at this picture? Or how has your week been? You know what I mean? It's kind of like a conversation with your father. If you have like one of those businessmen type father, that's kind of how it is. I mean, look at Tony Soprano and look at the TV show Soprano. Even though he was upset the whole time, imagine if he was talking to a guy. He would not have been sitting down at all. He would have left. He wouldn't have even gone. So you get where we're going with this. So neuroscience. She's teaching it. We're having a group therapy session, and she's talking about. She's like, the first thing she did. Like we come into this session, and she's like, I'm gonna discuss something that might actually make you guys laugh, but I've really got to ask you a serious question. Everybody's waking up now. I guarantee it's gonna make you laugh. Not saying it in those words, but kind of like stuff to make you like not want to go directly to sleep, even though it's a woman. Because I fell asleep in those group sessions also, but I was awake more than others, as most of us were. Who, she was fairly attractive for a therapist. All right, but so she says marijuana. I really got a smile on her face. Oh shit! How many of you experiment with the marijuana? Oh, it was kind of like that. One of my boys was in there. He was this little cool dude. He kind of Latino boy. He kind of reminded me of Big Pun because he rapped too. He didn't have the kind of Big Pun style, but that was my guy. I love that guy. Rest in peace to Big Pun. But my guy, he was in there, and we was both cheesing like, yeah, I do. So she's like, how would you guys? No wait. What would you guys think if I told you the truth about marijuana? And we're like, what? That's good. But she's like, yeah, it is. And I could tell, she didn't say it like that, but the gist. It can be more like it. But I want to tell you a little bit about a word that you never heard. Now, I don't know if she said neuroscience, but I do know she used the word neurotransmitters. This is the first time in my life that I'm not going to speak for anybody else, ever heard the word neurotransmitter in my life. Again, let this have came from a guy shrink. Yeah. So, neurotransmitters. Unless he just, because there's some good public speakers that are guys that can keep you awake long enough to give you the truth about this, like a woman can. It's just, you know what I mean? Kind of like one of those things, melts in your brain and not in the frying pan. Okay? So, you like that, right? It's funny. All right, so, but she was like, I want to tell you the truth about why you feel the way you do when you smoke weed according to science. Okay? So she's telling us about neurotransmitters and what they actually do. Now, for those of you who've never heard of neurotransmitters, who've never took a neuroscience class, what they are they're almost like, I'm not going to tell you what they're almost like. I'm going to tell you what they are. So they basically bounce off of each other in your brain, and they communicate when they connect. They let the other one know that this part of the brain is doing this, and also there's some that when they bounce, they tell, okay, this your part of the brain. When you bounce off of something else, you should do that. And whenever it tells it to do that, we say, well, let me go use the bathroom because I didn't think of that until my neurotransmitters told me that. Or let me scratch my butt. Let me get a drink of water. Ow, my hand feels like it's on fire. I didn't know I shouldn't touch the stove for that long while I'm high, eating weed cookies, drunk as hell. Okay? So that, in short, is what neurotransmitters are. It happens fast in the brain, but that, in short, is what they do. I could be wrong. You may want to ask one of my professors, but I am certified in concussion, the studies of what happens when you have a concussion, head trauma, and neuroscience, sports medicine from the University of Michigan. That doesn't make me an expert. That means that I could tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's something like that. All right, so anyway, but also it's more than that. The nickname that she gave them was they're the GLAD cells. Okay, so what the GLAD cells, why they're called the GLAD cells is because some of these neurotransmitters, they convey emotion. Okay, so that's why some people, when they smoke weed, some people may be more manic than others. Some people may be depressed. It depends on, it depends on who's intaking the substance. So, but long story short, minus all the jokes, I'm writing about these things because I'm thinking about quitting smoking weed. Not today. 2018, a few days before February 21st, Martin Luther King's birthday, as I was writing down this book. Okay? Around this time, I was thinking, what are some of the things that I could do to quit smoking weed? And I remembered what somebody told me, say the Lord's Prayer and jump rope. And I had a jump rope right there in my garage. And that's where I began. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Lord is my shepherd, I don't smoke blunts. The Lord is my shepherd, I will not quit. The Lord is my shepherd, I don't smoke cigs. Every single day, until I literally regimented the desire of smoking weed and cigarettes out of my life, and I haven't smoked for like 3 or 4 years. But it all starts with the realization about character defects, about problems, about things that are working for us and things that aren't. And the rest of the decision is in our hands. Nobody has to write a book, come out with a book series like me. You don't have to decide to go back to school. You don't have to change anything about your life you don't want to. But I just wanted to tell you this story. It ended up being a little bit lengthy, about this chapter in my book, Diary of a Glad Man, called Strange Fruit. And it's a great feeling to be sober, to not have smoked weed in 4 years or cigarettes in 4 years and still not have the desire. And it's one of those things that, no cliche, or one of my favorite things, when I have all these things that point to be sad, be depressed, be manic, be psychotic, be out of control, be everything except glad. It's one of those things that gives me a reason to be glad. Okay? So the Diary of a Glad Man, in short, I gave you as much as I could. If you're interested in reading more about my book, or reading more about me, or reading any of my short stories in my books, bear with me. I've been talking for, a lengthy amount of time. So, if I fumble over my words, blame it on the brain and not the heart. But I enjoy writing books just as much as I enjoy making music, just as much as I enjoy attempting to make a difference in people's lives through maybe one day being a forensics scientist in a lab, maybe just being a drug and alcohol counselor. Who knows? Uh, as of today, Friday, November 28th, Black Friday. I'm not in no immediate rush to go do this, that, or a third. You know what I'm saying? My home is here in Pittsburgh. I have an apartment where my rent is paid. I have a cell phone where my cell phone is paid. I have a bus pass. Um, I have a studio, tattoo equipment. I have a lot education and a lot of things to be grateful for. So when you think about the Diary of a Glad Man, I want you to think about just being grateful. And I'm not asking anybody else to be grateful. I'm giving you some of the reasons why I'm grateful, even though some of you out there might not be able to make sense of any of it. It makes perfect sense to me. All right? So you have a great day. It's Friday. Don't do anything that I wouldn't do. I urge you, if you're a serious study partner, looking for a serious study partner, get to know me. It doesn't have to be in a day. But more than that, as I sit down and pause and say shalom, it doesn't have to be right now. Sometime during this week, sometime during this month, when you're thinking about, man, you took a little break from Think Like a Cop. I want you to join me on the next Donnie's Talk and think like a cop.